Hey, everybody. We are at ng-conf. We're talking to Stephen Fluin. Stephen, do you want to say hi?
Hi, everybody.
Now, some of the folks who kind of follow where things go with Angular might know who you are, but some folks probably don't. So do you want to just introduce yourself real quick?
Sure. So my name is Stephen Fluin. I'm a developer advocate on the Angular team. And so what that means generally is that I'm responsible for helping developers and businesses be successful with Angular and for understanding what it's like to be a real developer out in the world so that we can reflect those needs onto the team, make sure we're making the right sorts of decisions as we continue to build out the product.
Nice. So do you want to just really briefly explain how the Angular team works? I don't know if people really understand like how you all work together.
Sure. So the Angular team is actually relatively small. So I'm going to just rough the numbers because it changes over time. But there's something like 6 or 7 folks working on the core framework. We've got around 4 or 5 folks working on the CLI. We've got 5 or 6 folks working on Angular material. And then we've got about 5 or 6 folks working on TypeScript in Google. So they handle kind of the build toolchain side of things to make sure that a company as large as Google is able to use Angular and TypeScript successfully.
That's awesome. So that's where a lot of the work on Bazel and things like that, yeah.
Yep, that's where a lot of that work comes from. So if you don't know, Angular starts and is built entirely open source, and then it's synced back into Google. Basically, every commit to GitHub ends up in Google in use on over 600 different projects.
Nice. And I think I saw something in the keynote yesterday where they essentially said that, or I saw it somewhere, that all of the products in Google that use Angular all have to use the same version?
Yes, exactly. It's one of our big kind of blessings and challenges, right? Because if we make a change to Angular, it has to work on all 600 plus of those apps.
Oh, wow.
And if it doesn't, if we want to push a breaking change through kind of the Google ecosystem, we have to go fix those apps. We're responsible. If we break their unit tests or their end-to-end tests, we have to fix Angular or fix their apps.
Wow. Well, I'm going to change gears on us a little bit. You have a couple of things that you have coming up at ng-conf. You're speaking a couple of times. Let's talk about your talk first, Angular for Designers.
Yeah. So this is a relatively new initiative that we're kind of starting to kick off. It's still very, very early where we're still in kind of the ideation phase. We've got a couple early initiatives. But for us, it's really about opening up Angular back to designers. So if you think back to AngularJS, there was kind of a lot of nice things about AngularJS for designers, right? If you didn't want to be living in the JavaScript world, you were living in a more HTML-based world, right? And you were building things like prototypes, proof of concepts, that AngularJS was quite good at, that is actually a little bit harder in Angular. And so this initiative is both about making it easier for designers to get in, designers who know HTML to modify an Angular application, get in, be effective at adding design, doing prototypes, but also in terms of encouraging and empowering these kind of sometimes separated groups between designers and developers to collaborate more and say, hey, because if a designer could be working within a live production code base, they're going to be more effective at manifesting the vision that they're hoping to see, and you can save developers time by not having to kind of re-implement something that a designer has thought up.
Yeah, and I can definitely see, I've worked with some designers that like they'll pick the colors and shapes and they'll kind of draw it on the computer, for lack of a better term, right? They use Photoshop, and that's more or less the extent of their design skills, which is still important because you want it to look nice and be usable. And then they can do that to the extent that the tools are available in Photoshop or something similar. And then you get designers that are kind of the next level up that can do CSS, they can do basic HTML, things like that. And so, yeah, if they can get in and they can make my component do, look, and react exactly how they want it to without having to deeply understand Angular or JavaScript.
Or have to install Node on your computer, right? Like,
yeah.
It sounds kind of maybe weird to a lot of developers who are used to doing this, but if you've never installed Node on your machine, it's not easy.
No, it's not. And then you have all the other things you have to understand with NPM and packages and, okay, why isn't this getting what I expect it to get? And yeah, if you've ever taught beginners, like true beginners, you know what a pain that is.
Yeah.
I mean, huge pain to get that set up.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not their job. It's not what they were trained to do. And so how can we kind of meet them where they are with the skills they have and help them be effective in collaborating?
Yep, absolutely. And that way they can give us the lines and color in the lines a little bit for us.
Yeah, and what's really interesting about this is that there's a lot of different approaches that we can and might be taking. So we're still kind of exploring, and this is why we're kind of bringing this out at ng-conf, is we want to hear from people in terms of what their needs are, what their challenges are. Because on one end of the spectrum, you have solutions like, I don't know if you've heard of PageDraw before, but so it's a visual designer that creates consumable components.
Oh, wow.
So you like drag and drop boxes. You can set properties that kind of manifest themselves as CSS. You can design kind of a little bit of responsiveness. You can map inputs. You can bind to them. And what it gives you is a set of HTML and a set of CSS and a Angular component that's designed to be consumed by developers as a dumb presentational component.
Oh, wow.
So it's not intended to be edited or modified by developers. So the idea is your designers live in one world designing the presentational components, and your developers are the ones wiring up the data.
Nice.
So that's a system called PageDraw, which I think they have a lot of cool ideas going on. They're still early in their kind of development cycle, but it's one of the things that I think is very interesting in terms of how do we empower better collaborations with fewer handoffs between these folks.
Right. That makes sense. And I think you're going to find that, or you may already have found, that a lot of companies define designer differently from each other.
Oh, and even designers like within the same team define themselves differently. I mean, there's an entire spectrum of someone that's just doing like print layouts and graphic design and logos, all the way to I think a lot of web developers are in many ways designers.
Yep, absolutely. I'm going to switch gears on us again. Briefly, I just want to mention that if you're looking for specific components for your applications, check out our sponsor, Kendo UI. They provided I can't talk. They provided some money to help me get up here and take care of these interviews and get to know people like Stephen a little bit better. And hopefully I can help you all get to know them as well. But if you're looking for I love their smart data table. I'm probably going to say that like through 6 or 7 of these interviews because it's such a handy component and it lets me just fiddle with data, which is kind of fun. But anyway, so that's kind of my thing. But I really appreciate them for sponsoring these interviews. So, Stephen, one of the things that I'm hoping to do in these interviews is not just say, oh, well, this is the talk you're giving, but I also want to give people a chance to get to know you a little bit.
Sure.
So, a little bit personally, maybe some hobbies. A lot of people like to mention that, they have so many kids or dogs or, whatever your thing is. So outside of work, what does your life look like?
Sure. So when I used to be asked this question growing up, like you have to fill it out on the forms, like what's your hobby? I always used to write computers, which to a lot of the people in our industry, that's not really a hobby anymore, right? Well, I still find it kind of relatively all-consuming. So like at my previous job, I would work all day managing teams, leading teams, working on UX, software architecture, writing no code at all, and then I'd go home and write code and kind of build apps and build businesses. So I really am passionate about that.
I have that same disease.
But beyond that, I do a lot of traveling. So both before this role as well as part of this role, which it kind of becomes a very natural complement where I get to go to these amazing places, Japan, China, where else? Poland, and kind of do the work. And then also have some fun, meet people. It's actually awesome because oftentimes you can use the kind of work side of things to create a connection, to create a relationship, and then those people are more willing to help guide you around a city, and it's a very unique way to explore.
Nice. That's awesome.
Yeah. So no kids yet, but I did. My beautiful wife Stephanie is joining me here at ng-conf, and she actually spoke at ng Europe earlier this year. So she's actually on the UX side, which is I think part of why I'm passionate about it. But I was actually passionate about UX. I led the UX team at one of my former companies.
Oh, good deal. Well, I hope you have fun out here in Salt Lake. And if you need any ideas of what to do or go see, let me know.
You're actually based here?
Yeah.
How did I not know that?
Yep. Yeah, I've known the organizers for a long time.
Very nice.
So yeah.
Yeah, I think we're going up to Moab this weekend.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, it's a few-hour drive, but it's beautiful.
Yeah, doing some glamping, which I've never done before.
Oh, that's where you camp out, but it's
glamorous camping.
Yeah. I don't even know what that would feel like, but it sounds like fun.
Like, yeah, my understanding, I have never done it before, but apparently it's basically camping, but you don't have to set it up yourself, which, like, there's a bed.
Yeah, I've heard there's an actual bed, which isn't camping, but that's fine. So you're also giving the keynote on the third day, probably with some other members of the team.
Yep, Rob Wormald and myself are doing that.
Okay.
And our vision there is all around reflecting a lot of the conversations we have with developers. So as part of our role, we end up talking to kind of thousands and thousands of developers about what they're doing, kind of what they're excited about, what they're running into. And so we want to reflect a lot of that back and say, hey, these are the problems people are facing, and these are how people are fixing them. You're not alone, right? Kind of because what we see is that about 90% of Angular apps, just anecdotally, are behind the firewall. So not consumer facing at all. And so you have all of these companies that are kind of building Angular apps in secret and not talking to each other, not building communities. And so we want to start forming some of those communities.
That's awesome. Now I love the keynotes partially for the kind of the feel that you get for the Angular team and how they interact with the community, and partially because they're big announcements. And this video will probably go out after the keynote. So do you want to kind of give people a flavor if there's anything that you're talking about that they're going to get excited about, so they can go watch the announcement, or is it all mostly what you just said?
It's mostly what I just said. I mean, I think it's going to be a reflection of a lot of things people assume, and we want to make it just explicit. We want to say, hey, everybody, it's okay. You're in good company. You're not on a crazy path here. We're all figuring this out together, and here's some of the emerging things that you should be doing.
Nice. Cool. I had another question, and I just totally lost it. But yeah. So how many years have you come to ng-conf?
So this is my third year of ng-conf. I did ng Vegas prior to that.
Right.
But what's funny is, so I joined the Angular team 2 years ago yesterday. And so I did my 2 weeks of Google training. Hey, here's a big company that has lots of cool stuff. Here's how you use it. And then the first day, like on the team, was at ng-conf.
Nice.
So no one knew me. Had never worked with the team. I'd done a bunch of Angular, but it was, as Jules put it, incognito mode or stealth mode.
Nice.
And so it's really kind of nice coming back. Last year, I did one of the keynotes, and then this year again doing another keynote. And I'm getting to know so much more of the community. And I walk through the hallways, and I'm like, oh hey. And it's we call it the hallway track, which is like one of the most important tracks of ng-conf. The sessions are amazing. Definitely attend as many sessions as you can. But even just walking down the hallways, start a conversation, because you have so much in common with everyone here in terms of the kind of cool things we're trying to build, and the excitement we have, and the excitement that we share with the community. And so the hallway track is definitely one of the most valuable things here.
I couldn't agree more. In fact, the longer I've been in this arena of just going to conferences, the more I come just to meet people, talk to people. And I get the opportunity, mainly because of the podcast, to talk to speakers and core team members, but just walking through the conference, having somebody come up and say, hey, the podcast made a difference, or, somebody new, I talk to them and find out that they think about things completely differently from how I do.
I love that. Broadening my own perspectives.
Yeah, exactly.
It's hard to do, but with if you keep trying and you keep at it, I think it's something you can be successful at.
Yeah, well, and I think it occurs to me that that's something somewhat essential for people on the Angular core team in particular, because you're dealing with such a wide array of people that are all trying to use the same thing that you're building in different ways.
And one of the things you have to remember, though, is that I call it the silent majority of Angular developers who don't show up at ng-conf.
That's true.
And so I'm always trying to be an advocate and find data and indicators to say, okay, what does Angular developer number 7,000,042 think, who doesn't show up at ng-conf, doesn't read our blog, doesn't read our Twitter? What do they need from a framework? What do they need from documentation, and how can we help them?
Absolutely. And how do people give feedback if they're not at ng-conf?
So, a lot of people file issues in our GitHub repository, so we pay a lot of attention to that. We do a yearly developer survey now, so we sent out the first one earlier this year, and we got 17,000 responses, which was
wow.
Way more than we thought we were going to get. So I think we're going to continue doing that and kind of measure and say, keep asking people and give people a forum to say, hey, here's what I care the most about. Here's what I need. Those sorts of things.
Very cool. Well, if people want to follow you in particular, or see what you're blogging or thinking about, where do they go?
Sure. So the easiest way is to follow me on Twitter at Stephen Fluin, StephenFluin. I usually post all my content on Twitter, whether it's new videos. So I do a video series called Demos with Angular on YouTube. I also I post a lot on the Angular blog, so I kind of manage some of our content there. We do lots of guest blog posts there, and then I just try and stay in touch with the community and find great things that other people are doing and building and sharing those out as well.
Good deal. Well, thanks for coming and talking to us, and best of luck with the glamping.
Yes, should be fun.
All right. Well, folks, if you want to catch his talks, the keynote's at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning?
I believe so, yes.
And then your other talk is going to be, later in the afternoon?
Yep, later in the afternoon.
All right. So the schedule's up at ng-conf.org. I should get this up hopefully before he gives his second talk and right around probably when the keynote happens. So, go check those out. And, if you have any feedback, let him know or let me know, and we'll get in touch.
Yeah, my door is open. A big part of my role is reflecting the needs of the community. So if you need something, let me know.
All right, great. Well, thank you, Stephen.
Thank you so much.